Hello, listeners of DrowsyTeller. Before we begin tonight's tale, I hope your day has brought you peace, wherever you may be. Whether you're sipping morning coffee in New York, enjoying afternoon tea in London, or winding down for the night in Tokyo, thank you for making DrowsyTeller part of your world. If you haven't yet, be sure to follow DrowsyTeller for more stories designed to stay with you, long after the final word. Now, get comfortable. What you're about to hear comes from a once classified journal, discovered in 1996, 3 years after its author's unexplained death. The journal belonged to Lieutenant Commander Mason Hale, an officer in U.S. Naval Intelligence. This is his personal account of Operation High Jump and the secrets buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice. U.S. Navy Intelligence Division Classification. Eyes only to be destroyed. Date range: August 1946, March 1947. Entry 1. August 15, 1946. USS Pine Island, Norfolk. Naval Base. My name is Lieutenant Commander Mason Hale, and if you're reading this, I'm likely dead, and someone has found what I was never meant to document. I'm writing this because the truth has a habit of resurfacing, no matter how deeply it's buried beneath ice or silenced over time. 3 days ago, I received orders that would shatter everything I thought I understood about our world. I was instructed to report to Admiral Richard Byrd for a top-secret briefing concerning Operation High Jump. The press is calling it the largest Antarctic expedition in history. 13 ships, 4,700 personnel, aircraft carriers, and enough firepower to occupy a small nation, for what's supposedly a research mission. It seemed excessively armed. The briefing room was cold and sterile, filled with unfamiliar faces that nonetheless carried the unmistakable bearing of the intelligence community. Admiral Byrd stood at the head of the table, his weathered expression somber as he spread aerial photos across the polished surface. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice weighted with concealed truths, "what I'm about to tell you stays in this room." He paused, letting the silence settle before continuing. Officially, Operation High Jump is a cold-weather training exercise. Unofficially, he scanned each of us, eyes sharp. We're going to Antarctica to determine whether we're alone down there. The photographs were mostly snow and ice, except for certain anomalies, unnatural dark shapes that broke the white expanse, geometric patterns, eerily artificial. One photo showed a metallic object partially embedded in the ice, reflecting sunlight in a way that felt wrong. These were taken during late 1945 reconnaissance flights, Byrd continued. The Brazilian Navy has reported similar sightings, disc-shaped objects moving at incredible speeds, emerging from and vanishing into the ice. He pointed to marked coordinates. We've also received reports of magnetic anomalies and unexplained radio interference. A colonel I didn't recognize leaned forward. "Sir, are we talking about the Germans? Everyone knows they had interest in that region." Byrd's expression turned grim. "That's what we need to determine." He laid down another photograph, this one depicting a massive ice formation with a clean, rectangular entrance carved into its face. This was taken 6 months ago. Look closely. Nature doesn't cut perfect rectangles into glaciers. A chill passed through me, and it had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "Admiral," I asked, "what exactly are we expecting to find down there?" Byrd met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen in a commanding officer: doubt and fear. "We're not going down there to explore, Commander Hale," he said quietly. "We're going to see who's already there." Entry 2. September 3, 1946. At sea, South Atlantic. The voyage south has been uneventful, but there's a tension among the crew you can almost taste. On ships, word spreads fast, especially when it's classified. Despite all the red tape, the rumors are flying. Everyone knows this isn't a penguin counting expedition. You don't bring destroyers and aircraft carriers just to test winter gear. I've been assigned to the intelligence unit aboard the Pine Island, working directly under Admiral Byrd. My orders: analyze all findings, compile reports, and maintain communication with Washington. What they didn't mention? I'd be documenting what may become the most important discovery, or the most dangerous cover-up in human history. Last night I spoke privately with Admiral Byrd on the deck. The Southern Cross gleamed overhead, the sea eerily calm. He looked different away from official settings, less composed, more human. "Commander," he said, lighting his pipe against the wind, "I've been to both poles. I've seen things that never make it into the reports. Lights in the sky, radio signals from coordinates that are supposed to be empty, readings our instruments can't explain." He exhaled smoke, silent for a moment. "But this time we have evidence." "Evidence of what, sir?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the water. 20 years ago, I'd have said Germans. Secret technology, maybe advanced experiments from the war. But the war ended a year ago, and the activities only increased. Whatever's down there, it isn't abandoned. Then what is it? I don't know, Commander, but I have a feeling we're about to find out. He turned to me, and in the moonlight his eyes looked haunted. "Keep a record of everything we find." Everything. Promise me? I promised, not knowing how heavy that promise would become. Entry 3, October 12th, 1946, Little America Forebase, Ross Ice Shelf. We've established our main base on the Ross Ice Shelf, building atop the site from Admiral Byrd's earlier expedition. The scale of this operation is staggering. Supplies and personnel sufficient for 8 months, yet the official timeline is 4. The math doesn't add up. Strange things began happening almost immediately. 2 days after we set up camp, our radio operators intercepted transmissions on frequencies that shouldn't exist. Sophisticated, encrypted, using methods beyond any technology we currently possess. The signals originated from deep within Queen Maud Land, the area the Nazis once claimed as Neuschwabenland. Lieutenant Peterson, our lead radio operator, brought me transcripts yesterday. His hands were trembling. "Sir, I've been doing this for 15 years, he said. "I've never heard encryption like this. It's not just coded, it's different. And some of it's in German, but not standard German. It uses technical terms I've never seen." I reviewed the recordings. Most were indecipherable, but one word repeated often: Base 211. According to wartime intelligence, rumors swirled that Nazi Germany had constructed a secret Antarctic base with that designation. It was dismissed as wartime myth. We were wrong. Byrd ordered immediate aerial recon over Queen Maud Land. The pilots came back with stories that would change everything. At an altitude of 15,000 feet, we observed multiple metallic objects emerging from the ice sheet approximately 200 meters inland from the coast. Admiral Byrd leaned forward. "Describe these objects, Commander." "Disc-shaped, sir. Roughly 50 to 75 feet in diameter based on comparisons with surrounding terrain. They moved unlike any aircraft I've ever encountered. No visible propulsion systems, no exhaust trails, and they accelerated from a dead stop to what I estimate was over 1,000 miles per hour in a matter of seconds." The room went silent. Johnson continued. "They appeared to emerge directly from the ice, sir. Not from surface installations, but from beneath the ice sheet itself. We counted 7 craft before they vanished into low cloud cover." Admiral Byrd examined the photographs Johnson had taken. Even in black and white, the objects were unmistakably artificial. Unlike anything in our current arsenal, their surfaces appeared seamless, almost mirror-like, reflecting the Antarctic landscape with unnatural clarity. "Did they acknowledge your presence, Commander?" Johnson's face darkened. "Yes, sir. They maintained formation with us for approximately 3 minutes before abruptly accelerating away. It felt like we were being studied." That evening, Admiral Byrd summoned me to his private quarters. Photographs and intelligence reports were spread across his desk, including files I hadn't seen before, some dating back to 1943, documenting similar sightings by German U-boat crews in Antarctic waters. "Commander Hale," he said without preamble, "tomorrow we're activating Project Silent Spear. It's a classified reconnaissance mission targeting the exact coordinates where those objects were observed. I want you to accompany the strike team as the intelligence liaison." "Strike team, sir?" I thought this was reconnaissance. Byrd's expression turned grim. "We're going in armed, Commander. Whatever's down there possesses technology decades beyond our own, and they are watching us. We need to understand their capabilities and their intentions before they decide we're a threat." I should have realized then, we were not the hunters in this situation. We were about to become the hunted. Entry 5, October 20th, 1946. Grid, coordinates 71 degrees south, 10 degrees west, Queen Maud Land. What happened today will haunt me for the rest of my life. I'm writing this by flashlight in an emergency shelter, my hands still trembling. 3 men are dead. 2 helicopters destroyed, and we barely escaped, with evidence the world may never see. Project Silent Spear launched at 0500 hours. The strike team included 2 helicopters, 12 Marines, and enough weaponry to reduce a small compound to rubble. Our target, a glacial canyon approximately 300 meters inland, where aerial reconnaissance had revealed what appeared to be artificial structures beneath the ice. The flight lasted 2 hours, cutting through unstable weather. As we neared the target, our radio communications became distorted, filled with interference that resembled whispers in unknown languages. Lieutenant Morrison, our pilot, reported multiple equipment malfunctions as we entered Queen Maud Land. At 07:15 hours, we crested a ridge and saw it. The canyon stretched for miles, its walls unnaturally vertical, as though carved by machinery rather than geological forces. On the canyon floor, 500 feet below, the structures became visible, geometric, metallic, and unmistakably artificial. The architecture defied anything I'd seen before. The surfaces bent light in strange ways, cloaking and revealing themselves in rhythmic patterns. But it wasn't the structures that left us frozen in place. It was what emerged from them. 3 disc-shaped craft, each approximately 100 feet in diameter, rose silently from hidden openings in the ice. They moved with a grace that violated known laws of physics, their mirrored surfaces reflecting our helicopters with crystal clarity. "Command, this is Silent Spear 1, Morrison radioed, his voice tight. "We have visual confirmation of artificial structures and 3 unidentified aircraft, requesting immediate backup." The response crackled through intense static. "Silent Spear 1. Proceed with reconnaissance. Document everything." That's when it all went wrong. One of the discs shot toward us at incredible speed. I braced for weapons fire. Rockets, bullets, anything conventional. Instead, a brilliant white beam of light emanated from beneath the craft, engulfing us. Every electrical system died instantly. Radios, navigation, engine controls, gone. Morrison fought to keep us steady as we entered auto-rotation, but the helicopter was a dead weight. "Mayday! Mayday! We're going down!" Through the chaos, I saw the second chopper suffer the same fate. The beam struck them. Their rotors ceased, and they dropped like a stone into the canyon below. I never heard their impact. Our emergency landing drowned out everything. We hit hard, but level. The helicopter skids carved deep grooves into the snow. Morrison was unconscious, blood pouring from a gash on his forehead. Sergeant Williams and 2 Marines were dazed but responsive. I grabbed the emergency radio and our camera equipment. We might only have minutes before those things decided what to do with us. Then I saw one of them up close. The disc lowered soundlessly, settling on the ice about 50 yards from our crash site. No landing gear deployed, no engines disengaged. It simply stopped, hovering 3 feet above the ground. The surface looked like polished mercury, seamless and fluid, covered in markings unlike any language I've seen. Not German, not any human language. The symbols shifted, morphing before my eyes. Hypnotic, unreadable, alien. A portion of the craft's underside opened, not with mechanical precision, but like a living organism flexing. Nothing stepped out, but I felt it. An awareness. We were being examined, judged. The silence was complete, broken only by the wind and Morrison's labored breathing. I lifted the camera and managed 3 photos before Sergeant Williams gripped my arm. "Sir, we need to move, now." He was right. Whatever intelligence occupied that craft, it had allowed us to survive the crash. That suggested either mercy or curiosity. And I wasn't about to test which would expire first. We fashioned a stretcher for Morrison and began climbing toward the canyon rim. The discs followed. They made no hostile gestures, but maintained formation like guardians or watchers. 6 hours later, we reached the rim, where emergency crews waited. The discs hovered a moment longer, then shot into the sky, disappearing faster than any aircraft we've ever built. Admiral Byrd stood at the landing site, his face dark with concern. As Morrison was loaded into a medevac chopper, Byrd pulled me aside. "What did you see down there, Commander?" I told him everything. The structures, the craft, the beam, how they moved and responded to us. When I finished, he was quiet. "Did they try to communicate?" "No, sir," I said, then hesitated. "But it didn't feel hostile. They could have killed us instantly. They didn't. It felt like a warning." Byrd nodded slowly. "A warning." He turned and stared into the wind, toward the canyon, hidden by fog and distance. "Yes," he whispered, "I think you're right." October 25th, 1946, USS Pine Island. Emergency Conference. The past 5 days have been a whirlwind of classified briefings, encrypted communications with Washington, and increasingly desperate efforts to make sense of what we've encountered. The photographs I captured in the canyon have since been analyzed by our top intelligence personnel, and their conclusions are both astonishing and deeply unsettling. The symbols on the craft's surface do not match any known human language or writing system. Linguistic experts believe they are not decorative, but functional, possibly part of an advanced interface or form of communication. The alloy composing the craft appears to be entirely unknown to modern metallurgy, exhibiting properties that shouldn't exist according to any scientific model we currently understand. Even more disturbing are the reports flooding in from other sectors since our encounter. Similar sightings have been documented by naval forces across the Southern Ocean. A destroyer reported being shadowed for over 30 minutes by a high-speed object that ultimately vanished beneath the ice. A submarine described sonar contacts moving at underwater speeds impossible for any known vessel. But the most critical development occurred yesterday, when Admiral Byrd received a direct communication from Washington. I wasn't present for the initial briefing, but Byrd's demeanor afterward told me everything I needed to know. We were no longer here to conduct reconnaissance. We were being recalled. "Commander Hale," Byrd said, calling me into his quarters late last night, "You need to understand something. What we've uncovered here will never become public knowledge. The implications are too vast, and the potential for mass panic too great." "With respect, sir," I asked, "don't the American people have a right to know?" Bird let out a dry, bitter laugh. "3 days ago, I received a communication that bypassed all normal channels. It appeared on my desk, typed in flawless English. The contents referenced mission details that only a handful of individuals should be aware of." He handed me a single sheet of paper. The message was brief, but chilling. "Admiral Byrd, your presence in our territory has been noted. We have no desire for conflict, but continued intrusion will be interpreted as hostile intent. You have 72 hours to withdraw your forces beyond 60 degrees south latitude. This is not a negotiation." The paper felt unusual in my hands, not like any material I had touched before. Under the lamplight, the text shimmered slightly, as if resisting being read. "Who sent this?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "The same intelligence that's been watching us since we arrived," Byrd replied. "The same force that could have destroyed both our helicopters, but chose only to disable them. They're giving us a chance to walk away, Commander. The question is whether we're wise enough to take it." November 2nd, 1946. Final Operations Meeting. Today, Admiral Byrd made a decision that would shape the rest of his career and haunt him until his final days. Operation High Jump was to be terminated, effective immediately. All personnel were to be evacuated within 48 hours. Equipment, aside from critical necessities, would be left behind. All records of our encounters were to be classified at the highest levels. The official explanation provided to the press would cite unexpected weather conditions and equipment failure. The truth would be buried so deeply that even many of the people who had lived it would never fully understand what they had been part of. In our last intelligence briefing, Byrd addressed the inner circle. 15 men who had seen enough to understand we were not alone in the universe, and that we were utterly unprepared for the implications of that realization. "Gentlemen," Byrd began, his voice laden with defeat, "what we've encountered in Antarctica represents a paradigm shift in our understanding of reality. We have come into contact with an intelligence that is technologically advanced. By decades, perhaps centuries. They have demonstrated both dominance and restraint." He paused, meeting each of our eyes in turn. "We were not just told to leave, we were warned never to return. And that warning carried an implicit threat. I have no doubt they possess the means to enforce it." Lieutenant Colonel Henderson, who had been skeptical throughout the operation, finally spoke. "Admiral, are we really going to let them dictate terms to the United States Navy?" Byrd's reply was grim. "Colonel, in the past month we've lost 2 helicopters, 3 men, and a submarine that hasn't been heard from since it submerged near their claimed territory. Every encounter we've had has shown that they could annihilate our task force without effort. This isn't surrender. It's survival. We are not retreating out of fear. We are retreating because we are outmatched." No one spoke. The weight of his words settled over the room like a lead blanket. It was a reality none of us wanted to accept, but one we could no longer deny. Everything we'd been trained to believe about military supremacy had just unraveled in a frozen wasteland. "Sir," I asked quietly, "what happens now? Do we simply pretend none of this happened?" Byrd walked to the window and stared out at the blinding white horizon, the landscape that had shattered everything we thought we knew. "Commander," he said, his back still to us, "I'm going to tell you something that will never appear in any official record. Before we leave, I intend to attempt direct communication with their leadership. I need to know their intentions, their capabilities, and most importantly, whether they plan to contact humanity again. Is that wise, sir?" Probably not, but it's necessary. He turned to face us, his eyes tired but resolute. Whatever lives beneath that ice has been watching us longer than we've been watching them. So far, they've shown restraint. But that could change the moment they perceive us as a threat. I need to know if peaceful coexistence is possible, or if we're already headed toward inevitable conflict. Still, none of us spoke. The implications were too vast, too horrifying. One more thing, Bird added. Each of you will be required to sign documents stating you will never speak of what you've seen here. Your families will be told you were part of routine cold weather training. Your service records will reflect nothing out of the ordinary. He pulled a thick stack of forms from his desk. I know this goes against everything you believe in. It goes against everything I believe in, too. But the alternative... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We all understood. The alternative was panic. Collapse. Or worse, on a scale capable of destabilizing society itself. How do you tell the world that we've discovered an advanced civilization living beneath the ice, possessing technology that renders our most sophisticated weapons equivalent to stone tools? We signed the documents. What choice did we have? November the 5th, 1946. Personal log, final entry. Today, Admiral Byrd made contact. I wasn't supposed to be present for the communication attempt, but Byrd requested me as a witness. We traveled by helicopter to coordinates transmitted through the same mysterious channel that delivered the prior warning. The location was a flat, featureless expanse of ice, roughly 50 miles from our base, marked only by a perfect circle of disturbed snow. We landed on the edge of the circle and waited. The Antarctic wind, normally relentless, was eerily calm. The silence was so complete, it felt unnatural. Oppressive. After 20 minutes, 3 disc-shaped craft appeared on the horizon, gliding toward us with their trademark gravity-defying grace. They formed a perfect triangle around our landing site, hovering 10 feet above the ice. As before, their mirror-smooth surfaces shimmered with flowing symbols that pulsed softly with internal light. Then, something new occurred. From one of the craft, a ramp extended. Not mechanical, but seemingly grown from the same living material as the hull. A figure appeared in the opening. I have struggled for hours to find the words to describe what I saw. The being was humanoid in form, but unmistakably not human. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, its proportions just slightly wrong. Almost familiar, but off in subtle, disquieting ways. Its skin appeared translucent, glowing faintly from within, as if lit by some internal biological energy. Its features were angular, refined. The eyes were large, black, and ancient. Eyes that had seen more than we could imagine. But what struck me most was the complete absence of hostility. The entity radiated calm, curiosity perhaps, even concern, but no aggression, no malice. It approached Admiral Byrd directly and stopped about 10 feet away. When it spoke, there was no sound. The words simply appeared in our minds, a direct, intimate form of communication that bypassed language, yet remained utterly clear. Admiral Byrd, you have shown wisdom in heeding our warnings. Your species stands at a developmental crossroads. The decisions made in the coming decades will determine whether contact becomes beneficial or necessary for your survival. Byrd, to his credit, remained composed, though the strain on his face was visible. What do you want from us? We want nothing. We have observed your species for millennia, monitoring your development with interest. Your recent mastery of atomic energy has drawn our focused attention. Such power, in the hands of a species still learning wisdom, presents a danger not only to yourselves, but to this world's equilibrium. Are you threatening us? Bird asked. "We are informing you. Your activities in this region must cease. The knowledge gained here will remain contained. In return, we shall maintain our policy of non-interference. For now." The implications were staggering. They had been watching us for thousands of years, and only our recent technological advancements had forced them into the open. "What happens if we refuse?" Bird asked. The being's expression did not change, but the temperature around us seemed to drop. The silence became heavier. "Your species is young, Admiral. You have not yet learned that actions carry consequences. There are boundaries that must not be crossed. We have preserved this world's balance far longer than your civilizations have existed, and we will continue to do so, with or without your cooperation." The communication ended abruptly. The being returned to its craft. The ramp retracted, and all 3 disks rose into the air and vanished into the Antarctic sky at velocities that defied physical explanation. Bird said nothing during the flight back. Only when we were alone in his quarters did he finally speak. "Commander, I need you to promise me something. If anything happens to me, if I die under strange circumstances or simply vanish, I want you to make sure the truth survives, not the official version. What really happened here?" "Sir, what are you planning?" "I'm going to give them what they asked for. Full withdrawal, complete silence, an end to all Antarctic operations. But I'm also going to ensure someone, somewhere, knows the truth. Because this isn't the end, Commander. This is only the beginning." 3 days later, we left Antarctica. The official report stated that equipment failures and adverse weather conditions had forced an early end to the mission. Admiral Byrd gave a brief interview to the Chilean press during our return journey, mentioning enemies that could fly from pole to pole in minutes. His statements were dismissed as metaphors, speculative comments about the future of aviation technology. But I knew better. He was trying to warn the world, in the only way he could, about what lies beneath the ice. Final entry. Mason Hale. I'm dying. Cancer, the doctors say, but deep down I suspect it's tied to something I was exposed to during those weeks in Antarctica. 47 years have passed since I carried this secret back into the world, watching as humanity edged closer to the precipice that entity warned us about. Admiral Byrd died in 1957. With him went the last official connection to what we discovered. He never spoke publicly about the encounter, and he never returned to Antarctica despite many opportunities. He knew, as I do, that some doors, once opened, must never be opened again. Over the decades, I've watched for signs that they are still monitoring us. UFO sightings, unexplained aerial phenomena, and leaps in technology that don't follow natural innovation curves. I believe they've been subtly intervening, perhaps protecting us from ourselves, until we're wise enough to wield our power responsibly. But their patience is not infinite. Recent global developments suggest we are nearing another critical threshold. The Cold War has ended, but new threats rise in its place. Environmental degradation, nuclear stockpiling, and the growing instability of human institutions. The lessons we were supposed to learn may have been forgotten. I've kept this journal hidden for 47 years, waiting for the right time to tell the truth. With my death approaching, I realize that time may never come. But if this record survives, if someone finds these words, perhaps future generations will be better prepared, because they are still down there, watching, waiting. And the warning they gave Admiral Byrd still stands. There is something beneath the ice, something that has protected this world far longer than we have existed on it. They gave us a chance to grow, to mature, to match our wisdom with our tools. Whether we've succeeded remains uncertain, but next time, and there will be a next time, we may not be allowed to leave. The journal of Lieutenant Commander Mason Hale was discovered in a safety deposit box in Phoenix, Arizona, in 1996, 3 years after his death from cancer. His nephew, David Hale, published excerpts online before the entire document vanished from all servers within 48 hours. David Hale died in a car accident 2 weeks later. This complete transcription was reconstructed from archived sources found on decommissioned servers and private hard drives. Its authenticity has never been verified. The United States Navy maintains that Operation High Jump was a routine training and research mission concluded within standard parameters. Admiral Richard E. Byrd's public comments in Chile, referencing enemies capable of flying from pole to pole, remain a matter of historical record. His quiet removal from future Antarctic operations and his silence on the mission have never been officially explained. Antarctica remains governed by international treaty, with all military activity strictly prohibited. No nation has attempted another operation on the scale of High Jump in the region where Lieutenant Commander Hale claimed his encounters took place. The truth, as always, remains buried beneath the ice. Tonight, I'll be your guide on a journey into one of the coldest and most enduring mysteries of the Cold War era. I want you to picture this. It's a winter night deep in the Ural Mountains, 1959. A group of young adventurers huddles inside a tent on the snowy slope of a peak ominously known as Dead Mountain. They're laughing, jotting down journal entries by flashlight, and planning tomorrow's trek. They don't know it yet, but this will be their last night alive. This is the true story of the Dyatlov Pass incident, a mystery that has haunted investigators for decades. My name is James, and I've spent weeks poring over old case files, diaries, and witness statements to understand what really happened to those 9 hikers in 1959. The more I uncover, the more the Dyatlov Pass incident feels like a nightmare teetering between fact and fiction. So let's walk through it together, step by step, as if we're the investigators reopening a cold case. The story begins in late January of 1959. 10 experienced ski hikers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute set out on an expedition to reach a mountain named Otorten in the northern Urals. All of them were in their early 20s, 7 men and 2 women, except for one older instructor. The group was led by a 23-year-old radio engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. On January 23rd, the Dyatlov group received their route book and departed the city of Sverdlovsk, today's Yekaterinburg, by train. Imagine them on that train. Excited, full of youthful energy, maybe singing along to a mandolin one of them had brought for the journey. After 2 days on trains, they reached Ivdel, a remote town at the edge of the northern Ural Mountains, which also housed a Soviet gulag for criminals. From Ivdel, they traveled by bus and then hitched a ride in the back of a woodcutter's truck to a settlement called Vizhai, the last inhabited village to the north. The locals in Vizhai likely looked at the students with a mix of admiration and concern. The route they planned was rated Category 3, the most difficult, and they were attempting it in February, the harshest time of year. On January 27th, the Dyatlov group left Vizhai and began their trek into the wilderness. One member, Yuri Yudin, had been struggling with chronic health issues. He had rheumatism and a congenital spine defect that caused joint pain. By January 28th, Yudin's condition worsened. With great reluctance, he turned back toward Vizhai. In doing so, he unknowingly sealed his fate as the expedition's sole survivor. Yuri Yudin would never see his friends alive again. The remaining 9 hikers pressed onward into the wild, unaware of what awaited them. Thanks to recovered diaries and photographs, investigators were later able to trace their journey. By January 31st, the group had reached the edge of a highland area and cached surplus food and gear in a wooded valley for their return trip. Spirits were high. They joked around, took photos, and even created a mock newspaper they titled The Evening Otorten. In one satirical entry they wrote, "From now on, we know that the snowmen exist," likely a playful reference to local Yeti legends. On February 1st, they began their ascent through a mountain pass that would later bear Dyatlov's name. Their plan was to cross the pass and make camp in the valley beyond, but the weather turned against them. A blizzard brought zero visibility and howling winds. The team lost their way on the barren slope. Instead of descending 1.5 kilometers into the sheltered forest, they ended up west of their intended route, on the side of a mountain called Kholat Shiako, which, in the native Mansi language, ominously means dead mountain. By the time, they realized their mistake. It was late in the day, and visibility was nearly non-existent. Rather than descend to safety, Igor Dyatlov made the call to pitch their tent right there on the mountainside, fully exposed to the storm. Perhaps he didn't want to lose the altitude they'd gained. Or maybe he wanted to demonstrate they could handle camping on an open slope in a blizzard. Whatever the reason, the 9 hikers set up their tent on the bare snow, carving into the slope to create a level space. It's a decision that would later be intensely scrutinized. That evening, February 1st, 1959, was bitterly cold. Temperatures dropped to around -20 degrees Celsius, with fierce winds ripping across the mountainside. Inside the tent, the group was relatively safe. They ate a hot meal. Later, forensic tests would show their stomachs contained food consumed around 6 to 7 p.m. In one of the last photos recovered from their cameras, they are seen smiling, joking, and preparing camp in the fading twilight. Despite the wind and cold, their morale appeared high. They wrote in journals, chatted, and settled in for the night, completely unaware of the terror that was about to strike. Sometime after midnight, in the early hours of February 2nd, everything changed. We have no eyewitnesses to describe what happened next. All we have is the physical evidence left behind. And that evidence reads like the opening act of a horror story. The tent was slashed open from the inside. The 9 hikers, whether asleep or just resting, fled into the storm. They left behind nearly all their gear: boots, coats, hats, sleeping bags, even axes and flashlights. It was -30 degrees Celsius, -22 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Yet, something startled them so badly that they ran out half-dressed and barefoot into the blizzard. Why? What could have terrified them, or otherwise forced them to abandon their only source of shelter and expose themselves to near certain death? That is the question investigators have struggled to answer for over 60 years. When the group failed to return to Vijay by February 12th as scheduled, there wasn't immediate alarm. Delays of a few days were typical in expeditions of this kind. But as time dragged on and no message arrived, the hikers' families grew anxious. By February 20th, desperate relatives demanded a search and rescue mission. The Ural Polytechnical Institute responded first, dispatching teams of student volunteers to retrace the group's route. Soon after, the Soviet military joined the search effort. Planes and helicopters were deployed. The rescuers, too, battled fierce weather as they scanned miles of snow-covered wilderness. Among the volunteers was a student named Mikhail Sharavin. On February 26th, he would make a discovery that would shock the nation. That day, Sharavin's team was moving along the slopes of Kholat Shiako when they noticed something strange protruding from the snow. As they drew closer, they realized it was part of the missing hiker's tent, collapsed and half buried in drifts. Sharavin used an ice pick to force open the tent's snow-covered entrance. What he found inside defied logic. The canvas had been cut from the inside with a knife. Though snow had partially filled the interior, almost all of the hikers' belongings were still inside, arranged neatly. There were blankets, coats, boots lined up in a row, flashlights and axes placed carefully, a map, official documents, and even a small pile of money. In one corner, a plate of salted pork fat sat as if someone had been preparing a snack. It was like a moment frozen in time, orderly, undisturbed by chaos. Sharavan later said it looked as if the group had been in the middle of dinner and suddenly fled. The scene sent a chill through him. Why would 9 experienced hikers, well-prepared, intelligent, and familiar with the dangers of winter expeditions, cut open their only shelter and run out into a snowstorm without boots or coats? Outside the tent, the searchers found footprints in the snow, and they only deepened the mystery. There were 9 sets of footprints, matching the number of missing hikers. The rescuers could see impressions of feet wearing only socks, a single shoe, and in some cases completely barefoot, clear enough that individual toes could be seen in the frozen snow. The tracks indicated that the hikers hadn't run in wild panic, but had moved quickly, perhaps at a hurried shuffle, in an organized single file down the slope. The rescuers followed the footprints downhill toward a dense forest. Incredibly, the prints continued for about 500 meters before being covered by fresh snow. It appeared the group had deliberately headed toward the forest, possibly seeking shelter or attempting to regroup. Sharavan and the others were baffled. What could have caused these experienced hikers to flee their tent into sub-zero conditions, barely dressed, even barefoot, calmly walking into the night? With dusk falling on February 26th, the searchers had to pause for the night, haunted by the strange scene they had just discovered. The next day, search teams spread out from the tent toward the forest. At the edge of the trees, beneath a tall Siberian cedar, Sharavan and his group made a chilling discovery. Near the blackened remnants of a small fire lay the first 2 bodies. What they saw defied logic. Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Yuri Krivonishenko were found side by side in the snow, barefoot, and dressed only in their underwear. The cedar's branches above them were broken up to 5 meters high, as if someone had climbed the tree, perhaps to get a better view of the area, to locate the tent in the dark, or to escape something. Bits of skin and torn fabric were found embedded in the bark, supporting the theory that someone had ascended the tree in desperation. Krivonishenko's body showed burns on parts of his limbs. More disturbingly, he was missing a portion of flesh from his right hand. Later, analysis revealed that he had bitten off part of his own knuckle, possibly to stay conscious, or as a reflexive act while freezing to death. Both men's extremities were deeply frostbitten, a reddish-brown color suggesting prolonged exposure. The fire they built had been small, and by the time they died, it had long burned out. The cedar's branches had been stripped for kindling, but it hadn't been enough. The image of these 2 men huddled around a dead fire, slowly freezing to death in their underwear beneath an endless black sky, is something difficult to forget. Roughly 300 meters from the cedar, toward the tent, the searchers found the body of Igor Dyatlov. He was lying face up in the snow, head turned uphill, as though trying to crawl back to the tent. Dyatlov was better dressed than the men under the tree. He wore a flannel shirt, a sweater, and pants, but he had no coat or boots, only socks on his feet. One of his arms was frozen upright, reaching toward the sky, and in that hand he clutched a small birch branch. His other hand was pressed to his chest. Observers noted that he seemed to be protecting something close to his heart, possibly a photograph or a notebook, though nothing was found when his jacket was opened. His face, uncovered by snow, appeared calm. His eyes were still open. Not far from Dyatlov, searchers found Zina Kolmogorova, a 22-year-old student. Zina was dressed more warmly, wearing 2 sweaters and 2 pairs of pants, but like Igor, she lacked boots and had only socks on her feet. Her body was oriented toward the tent, arms outstretched and bent at the elbows, as though she had been crawling uphill on her stomach, trying desperately to reach shelter before the cold claimed her. On her side, a long, deep bruise ran across her torso. a blunt force injury resembling the strike from a baton or rifle butt. It was strange because she had no other external wounds. It took several more days, until March 5th, to find Rustem Slobodin, the fifth member of the group. He was found face down in the snow, approximately 480 meters from the cedar tree, almost halfway between it and the tent. Slobodin, 23, was more warmly dressed. He wore a long-sleeved undershirt, sweater, 2 pairs of pants, 4 pairs of socks, and 1 felt-lined boot on his right foot. His left foot had only a sock, and his head was bare. In his right hand, he held a small pocket knife, closed. An autopsy revealed a 7-inch fracture in his skull, a blunt trauma injury. However, the injury was not immediately fatal. The examiner believed Slobodin could have continued moving for up to an hour after sustaining the blow. Like Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, Doroshenko, and Krivonishenko, Slobodin ultimately died from hypothermia. In fact, all 5 of the first bodies discovered showed no fatal external injuries. They had succumbed to the bitter cold of the Ural winter. Slobodin's wristwatch was found shattered, stopped at 8:45, though it was unclear whether it was AM or PM, or even if the date was correct. It was as if time itself had frozen. Now, imagine being Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back, called to identify the bodies of your friends one by one. The 5 corpses were flown to the morgue in Ivdel for autopsy and confirmation. Yudin, heartbroken, confirmed their identities, but 4 hikers were still missing. Weeks passed. The search dragged on. Spring sunlight began to melt the thick snows, and with that thaw came new revelations, turning mystery into something far more disturbing. On May 4th, a local Mansi tribesman named Kurikov and his dog were assisting the search effort. The dog picked up a scent near a rocky ravine deeper in the woods, roughly 75 meters beyond the cedar tree and about 1,500 meters from the tent. Near a snow-filled ravine, searchers found fragments of torn clothing on a branch. Digging into the snow, they uncovered the final 4 victims, buried under nearly 4 meters of compacted snow. They were Lyudmila, Luda, Dubinina, Semyon, Alexander, Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault Brignol, and Alexander Kolovatov. They were found roughly 75 meters farther into the forest from the cedar, at the bottom of the ravine. 3 of the 4 were dressed more thoroughly than the previous victims. In fact, it appeared they had taken clothing from those who died earlier. Dubinina, for example, was wearing Krivonishenko's torn and scorched brown pants, and her foot was wrapped in part of his wool sweater. Zolotaryov, 38, wore Dubinina's faux fur coat and hat. Kolovatov had added another sweater and extra pants, likely from one of the others. The transfer of clothing suggested a tragic but practical act of survival. Those who died first had been stripped of warm garments by those still clinging to life. But the condition of these final 4 bodies only deepened the mystery. Unlike the first 5, 3 of these 4 had suffered violent and fatal physical trauma. Nikolai Thibault Brignol had suffered a catastrophic skull fracture. His skull crushed, the fracture measuring approximately 8 inches. Dubinina and Zolotaryov both had severe chest trauma. Dubinina's ribs were shattered, 10 broken. Zolotaryov had 5 ribs fractured. The forensic examiner stated that the force required to cause such injuries was immense, comparable to a high-speed car crash. Yet, strangely, none of them had corresponding external bruises or wounds. The skin was intact. It was as if they had been crushed by a powerful pressure, something that inflicted internal destruction without breaking the surface. It was not the kind of trauma typically associated with blunt force from falling or avalanche debris. It was something else, something the investigators could not explain. The 4th body found in the ravine. Alexander Kolovatov had a less clearly defined cause of death. He suffered a broken nose, an open wound behind his ear, and a twisted neck. But his injuries weren't as catastrophic as the others. It's believed Kolovatov also died of hypothermia, possibly after sustaining some physical trauma. And then there were the gruesome details that helped cement this case in infamy. All 4 of the victims found in the ravine had suffered soft tissue damage to the head and face, something not seen in the other bodies. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, both eyes, parts of her lips, and even a piece of skull bone. Semyon Zolotaryov had no eyeballs. Alexander Kolovatov was missing his eyebrows. These disturbing injuries sparked a wave of lurid speculation. Had the group been attacked by something or someone capable of ripping out tongues and eyes? However, medical experts offered a more mundane explanation. The 4 bodies were discovered in a stream bed, and they had likely been exposed to running water and scavenging animals during the 3 months before their recovery. This exposure could account for the decomposition or removal of soft tissue. In Dubinina's case, the autopsy revealed that her stomach contained approximately 100 grams of coagulated blood, suggesting her heart was still beating when her tongue was removed. That likely means the tongue decomposed or was scavenged very shortly after death. As horrific as these details sound, investigators concluded they were post-mortem effects, not signs of violence inflicted while the victims were alive. Still, when these findings became public, they ignited waves of speculation about secret killings, wild animals, or supernatural threats. The theories weren't helped by the fact that Zolotaryov was found wearing a camera around his neck, different from the other cameras recovered from the tent. Even stranger, he was holding a pen and a notepad, as if he had died trying to write something. But the page was blank. In 1959, investigators were at a loss to explain it all. A criminal inquest was launched as a matter of standard procedure, especially because several of the deaths involved physical trauma. At first, suspicion fell on the native Mansi people, reindeer herders who lived in the region. Authorities wondered if the hikers had trespassed on sacred land and been attacked in retaliation, but that theory was quickly discarded. The only footprints at the site belonged to the hikers themselves, and there were no signs of struggle or combat on the bodies. In fact, the Mansi assisted in the search and had no documented history of hostility toward outsiders. Next, investigators considered the possibility of an avalanche, but the layout of the tent and the footprint pattern seemed inconsistent with such a scenario. We'll return to this theory later. As for a wild animal attack, no large animal tracks were found, and the injuries didn't show signs of claws or teeth. That theory, too, was dismissed. Eventually, Soviet authorities concluded that no other humans had been involved in the Dyatlov group's demise. One of the forensic doctors famously stated that the force which killed Dubinina and Zolotaryov exceeded what any human could inflict. No human, he said, could have delivered such damage. Then another strange detail surfaced, one that added a Cold War-era twist. When forensic analysts tested the hikers' clothing, they detected unusual levels of radiation on some of the garments. Specifically, Dubinina's brown sweater and Krivonishenko's wool pants showed radioactive contamination. This discovery didn't make sense in the context of a hiking expedition. Radiation isn't something that casual searchers would think to check for. It was only found because one of the investigators happened to have access to a Geiger counter. The presence of radiation gave rise to theories about secret weapons tests or fallout from experimental technology. But closer scrutiny offered a more prosaic explanation. Yuri Krivonishenko had previously worked at the Mayak nuclear facility and had participated in cleaning up the aftermath of the Kishtim disaster in 1957, one of the worst nuclear accidents in history. It's entirely possible that some of his clothing retained radioactive contamination from that time. Similarly, Alexander Kolovatov studied nuclear physics and worked at a classified research institute in Moscow. He, too, may have worn or packed clothing contaminated from his prior work. In short, the radiation may have had nothing to do with the Dyatlov incident. It could have been a coincidence, a red herring. Still, the families were haunted by other unexplained details. Some of the bodies reportedly had deep, unnatural tans. In addition, relatives claimed their hair had turned gray prematurely. These signs only fueled public suspicion of radiation exposure, or even chemical involvement. Authorities dismissed these claims, stating that the tanning effect was the result of natural mummification from exposure to sun and cold, and that hair discoloration could be caused by decomposition or the embalming process. But in 1959, to the grieving families, orange skin and radioactive clothing sounded like the stuff of government conspiracies or science fiction nightmares. By May of that year, the official investigation was winding down. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, was under mounting pressure to close the case. In his final report, Ivanov wrote that the hikers had died as a result of the effects of an unknown compelling force. It was a vague phrase, a bureaucratic way of saying, "We don't know." No external culprits were named. No charges were filed. The case was marked secret and filed away in Soviet archives. The Dyatlov Pass area was declared off limits to hikers and researchers for the next 3 years, officially to prevent further tragedy, though many believe it was to keep prying eyes away. The phrase, unknown compelling force, became a haunting riddle, one that raised more questions than it answered. 9 lives were lost, and the official response was, "You'll never know how or why." This was the Soviet Union in 1959. When the party or the KGB told you to stop asking questions, you stopped, out of fear. Some parents, however, were never satisfied. Zina Kolmogoreva's mother and Igor Dyatlov's family reportedly received veiled warnings from officials. "You will never know the truth," they were told, "so stop asking." And so, the children were buried without answers. The Dyatlov incident faded into an eerie Cold War legend, whispered about in Ural classrooms and mountaineering clubs. As for Yuri Yudin, the lone survivor, he lived the rest of his life carrying the weight of unanswered questions, the burden of survivor's guilt, and a deep suspicion that something was being concealed. He never believed it was just a tragic accident. In his final interviews before his death in 2013, Yudin publicly expressed his belief that the authorities knew more than they were willing to admit. He even went so far as to say that he believed his friends had been taken from the tent at gunpoint and executed. He suspected Dubinina's tongue had been cut out because she was outspoken. Perhaps she had said something she wasn't supposed to. These were serious accusations. Yudin admitted he had no concrete proof, only years of reflection and an unshakable feeling that something unnatural had happened. Whether he was right or wrong, Yudin's testimony speaks to the depth of this mystery and how profoundly it affected those close to it. So, here we are, decades later, with more questions than answers. I'm a modern investigator, sifting through yellowed case files and fragmented theories. And as I piece together the story, I can almost feel that same icy wind blowing down from Dead Mountain. The Dyatlov Pass incident has become one of the most enduring unsolved mysteries of the 20th century, precisely because it exists at the intersection of the explainable and the unexplainable. Over the years, dozens of theories have emerged, some grounded in science, others veering into the paranormal or conspiratorial. Let's examine those theories one by one, like branching paths in an investigation, and see where each one leads. Remember, any satisfactory explanation must account for all the strange details we've discussed: the slashed tent, the state of undress, the fatal internal injuries, the radiation, the reports of strange lights in the sky, and the secrecy. It's a tall order, but we'll follow each path. And the first is the one Russian authorities themselves eventually endorsed: the avalanche theory. For many, this is the most straightforward explanation. Picture the scenario. The Dyatlov group is asleep in their tent on the slope, when, suddenly, a slab of heavy snow above them fractures and slides downward. The tent fabric begins to collapse. They hear the low rumble of moving snow. In a flash, panic sets in. They believe a full avalanche is about to bury them in seconds. Thinking they have no time to lose, they grab a knife and slash the tent open from the inside, possibly because the main entrance is blocked or difficult to open under the weight of the snow. They flee into the night wearing whatever they had on at that moment. This theory gained serious traction, and, in fact, between 2019 and 2020, the Russian government reopened the Dyatlov Pass case and officially concluded that a slab avalanche was the cause of death. Later that year, a group of scientists published computer simulations supporting the plausibility of this scenario. The primary appeal of the avalanche theory is that, viewed through this lens, the hiker's actions no longer appear irrational. If you believe an avalanche is about to bury you alive, slashing your way out of the tent and moving to safer ground becomes the correct and immediate response. According to this theory, a slab of snow, possibly loosened by strong wind or the residual heat from their stove, slid down and partially buried the tent, causing loud cracks and vibrations. The group, composed of highly experienced hikers, initiated an emergency evacuation. They cut through the tent and headed for safer terrain, away from any potential secondary slides. That meant moving quickly toward the tree line on the far side of the pass. They didn't stop to put on boots or gather supplies, because every second counted. In their minds, the avalanche was imminent, and getting clear of the danger zone was the only priority. Wearing only socks and light clothing, they descended nearly a mile downslope toward the forest. There, they regrouped and tried to stay alive by building a fire. We saw evidence of this beneath the cedar tree. They also dug a snow cave for shelter. In fact, the ravine where the final 4 bodies were discovered had branches laid out along the bottom, likely the floor of a crude snow shelter. New story: the disappearance of Malaysia. Airlines Flight MH370. If this is your first time with sleep theories, welcome to our corner of the internet, where we explore the stories that keep us awake at night, the mysteries that official reports never quite explain, and the questions that linger long after the news cycle moves on. Don't forget to subscribe and tap that notification bell. We bring you investigations that challenge everything you think you know about the world. My name is Daniel Rhodes, and for 32 years, I analyzed threats that didn't officially exist. NSA, CIA, and a few acronyms that still don't have Wikipedia pages. I spent my career living between the lines of redacted documents. When I retired in 2012, I thought I was done with secrets. I thought I could finally sleep without wondering what moved in the dark corners of geopolitics. Then Flight MH370 vanished, and sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. March 8, 2014, 12:41 a.m. local time. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 pushes back from Gate C1 at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, with over 18,000 flight hours, and First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, 27 years old, transitioning to the Boeing 777, are in command. Together, they carry 237 souls, passengers and crew, toward what should have been a routine 6-hour flight to Beijing Capital International Airport. The flight proceeds without incident for 38 minutes. At 1:19 a.m., First Officer Hamid's voice crackles over the radio. "Good night, Malaysian 370. It is the last official transmission ever received from the aircraft. Within 2 minutes, the plane's transponder goes silent. Secondary surveillance radar tracking MH370 across Malaysian airspace suddenly shows nothing but empty sky. For the next 4 hours, Malaysian air traffic controllers wait. They make calls. They check systems. They assume there's been a malfunction. Weather interference, technical glitches, anything except the truth already unfolding 35,000 feet above the South China Sea. The plane had not crashed. It had not exploded. It had simply ceased to exist. On every screen, monitor, and system designed to track commercial aircraft along one of the world's busiest flight corridors. But here's what the public wasn't told in those crucial early hours. MH370 didn't just vanish from Malaysian radar. It disappeared from secondary surveillance systems across 3 countries, simultaneously. The odds of 3 separate national systems experiencing synchronized failure are so astronomically low that they approach statistical impossibility. I didn't learn this from CNN or the BBC. I learned it 6 months later from a phone call. The caller identified himself only as Mitchell, a voice I hadn't heard since a classified Langley briefing sometime in 2009. "Danny," he said, using a nickname known only to 5 people on Earth. "You still got that clearance?" "Retired," I said. "Not revoked." "Then look at Diego Garcia," he said, "and stop trusting the satellite data." Then the line went dead. Mitchell had always been a man of few words, but even for him this was cryptic. Diego Garcia, an American military atoll in British Indian Ocean territory, one of the most secretive bases on the planet. What could a missing Malaysian passenger jet possibly have to do with a facility that officially doesn't conduct operations requiring congressional oversight? I spent the next week telling myself to let it go. I was retired. I had a small house in Vermont, a vegetable garden, and a pension that would last until the inevitable heart attack or cancer diagnosis that tends to find everyone in my old line of work. But Mitchell's voice echoed in my head like a smoke alarm at 3 in the morning. So I started digging. The first thing I learned, Diego Garcia sits roughly 2,400 miles southwest of MH370's last known position, well within the range of a Boeing 777, carrying the fuel load that MH370 had on board when it left Kuala Lumpur. The second thing, there was a suspicious gap in radar coverage along a stretch I began calling the Southern Silence Corridor, an area between Indonesia and the southern Indian Ocean where both civilian and military radar systems left an enormous blind spot. A blind spot big enough to hide a commercial jetliner. The third thing I uncovered changed everything. Inmarsat, the British satellite communications firm, had been quietly collecting handshake signals from MH370 long after its transponder went dark. Their satellites continued to exchange routine pings with the aircraft for 6 hours and 11 minutes after radar contact was lost. 6 hours. The plane didn't crash in the South China Sea, as early reports had assumed. It kept flying, on a path that took it far from any intended destination. Eventually, the official investigation acknowledged the Inmarsat data, but only after Malaysian authorities spent weeks searching in the wrong ocean. By the time the search shifted to the southern Indian Ocean, any debris had likely been scattered by current, wind, and time across a vast area, an area roughly the size of the continental United States. But I had access to resources the public and most journalists did not, through a network of former colleagues who still owed favors to people like me. I obtained copies of the raw Inmarsat data, complete with technical annotations that had been redacted from the public release. What I found in those margins made my hands tremble. The satellite pings revealed that MH370 had not simply flown south and crashed. The aircraft had made a series of altitude changes and course corrections that strongly suggested active piloting throughout its final hours. More troubling still, The ping interval showed periods where the plane appeared to be flying in holding patterns, circles in the sky, as if waiting for clearance to land. I cross-referenced the ping data with maritime traffic records from Indian Ocean shipping lanes. On the night of March 8, 2014, there was an unusual absence of commercial vessels along MH370's projected flight path. Ships that should have been in the area, based on their filed routes, had either altered course or delayed departure from their previous ports. It was as if someone had cleared a corridor through one of the world's busiest maritime zones. Then I found the eyewitness reports. In September of 2014, residents of Kudahuvadhu Island in the Maldives reported seeing a low-flying aircraft around 6:15 a.m., local time on March 8th, roughly 6 hours after MH370's last radar contact. The aircraft was described as white with red stripes, consistent with Malaysia Airlines livery. It was flying unusually low, heading southwest, directly toward the open ocean. The Maldivian government initially launched an investigation into the reports. Then, without explanation, the case was classified, and officials refused further comment. When pressed by international media, Maldivian authorities claimed the sightings were unreliable, suggesting the residents had mistaken a domestic flight for the missing airliner. But I knew something they didn't want publicized. There were no scheduled domestic flights over Kudahuvadhu at 6:15 a.m. on March 8, 2014. In fact, the island's airstrip had been closed for runway maintenance since March 5th. The only aircraft scheduled to depart from Malé that morning, a Maldivian air taxi flight, was not due to leave until 7:30 a.m., over an hour later, and it was heading in the opposite direction. Southwest of the Maldives lay 800 miles of open ocean, and then Diego Garcia. I began constructing a timeline that made my past career in intelligence analysis seem almost quaint by comparison. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 had not crashed. It had been diverted along a carefully planned route, one that avoided radar detection, maritime traffic, and civilian observation, until the very last moment, when residents of a remote island happened to look up and see something they were never supposed to witness. But why? What could possibly justify orchestrating the disappearance of a commercial airliner and the deaths of 239 innocent people? The answer lay not in the aircraft, but in the passenger manifest. Every intelligence analyst is trained to look for patterns that hide just beneath the surface of apparent randomness, and MH370's manifest contained several. 20 passengers worked for Freescale Semiconductor, a Texas-based company specializing in microprocessors and embedded systems. They were en route to Beijing for a technical conference, reportedly carrying laptops and documents related to advanced radar and stealth applications. Among them was Dr. Chen Wei, a lead engineer on an internal Freescale project codenamed Mirror, research into electronic systems that could manipulate radar signatures in real time. 4 other passengers had boarded the flight using stolen Austrian and Italian passports. The original thefts had been identified within days, but the true identities of those who used the stolen documents to board MH370 were never confirmed. Interpol reported that the ticket purchases had been made in cash through a travel agency in Bangkok, which had no records beyond basic booking details. Then there was Yan Luo. Listed on the manifest as a software consultant traveling from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, Luo was not what he seemed. According to files I obtained through confidential sources I cannot disclose, Yan Luo was a former Chinese military cyber analyst. He had been developing quantum encryption algorithms for the 3rd Department of the People's Liberation Army, their Signals Intelligence Division. 6 months before MH370 vanished, Luo had approached the CIA through an intermediary, expressing his intent to defect. He claimed to possess breakthrough research into quantum-resistant encryption, algorithms that could render Western surveillance systems obsolete within a decade. The agency had entered into preliminary negotiations with Luo in December of 2013. Talks stalled over financial terms and security arrangements for his family, who remained in mainland China. What Luo didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that his communications had been intercepted. The NSA's Special Collection Service, operating from the U.S. Embassy in Kuala Lumpur, had been monitoring him since October of 2013, logging every call, every movement, every file transfer. I spent weeks reconstructing the intelligence picture that senior officials would have had in the days leading up to MH370's disappearance. What emerged was a convergence of strategic variables that painted a radically different picture of the plane's final hours. Freescale Semiconductor's largest institutional investor was a private equity firm called Jacob Partners, an entity linked, in classified briefings, to DARPA funding streams for experimental radar projects. The 20 Freescale employees on board weren't just attending a conference. They were carrying prototype hardware and source code for systems that could theoretically make aircraft invisible to radar. Yan Lo's encryption work, if authentic, represented a paradigm shift in signals intelligence. His algorithms, if viable, would nullify years of NSA investment and enable China to communicate securely without fear of interception. The convergence was too perfect to dismiss as coincidence. A single flight, departing from a region with minimal oversight en route to Beijing, carrying both the intellectual property and the personnel capable of giving China a decisive edge in stealth and cyber warfare. But there was one more anomaly I couldn't ignore. 3 weeks before MH370 disappeared, a Boeing 777 identical to the lost aircraft was photographed at Diego Garcia during a commercial satellite pass. The plane was parked inside a maintenance hangar typically reserved for U.S. military aircraft. When I acquired high-resolution images through trusted back channels, I saw something that chilled me to the core. The aircraft's antenna array matched MH370's configuration exactly. Someone had been preparing for this, possibly for months. They had cleared air corridors, positioned assets, prepared a location. All they needed was the right opportunity. A flight carrying the passengers and technology whose disappearance would satisfy multiple strategic goals. Simultaneously, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was not the victim of mechanical failure, pilot suicide, or a random hijacking. It had been hijacked by the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus on Earth, using methods most people couldn't imagine, let alone believe if told. But the operation didn't end with the aircraft's disappearance. In fact, that was only the beginning. In November of 2015, 18 months after MH370 vanished, I received an encrypted email from an address I didn't recognize. The message contained only a phone number and the phrase, Hangar 7, Test Flight 847. I stared at the screen for 10 full minutes before realizing what I was looking at. Hangar 7 was a maintenance facility at Boeing's Everett plant, where experimental avionics systems were tested and installed. Test Flight 847 was a program I remembered from a classified briefing back in 2010. An initiative focused on developing optical camouflage systems for military aircraft. I called the number. Mr. Rhodes? The voice was nervous, middle-aged, with a slight southern accent. My name is Marcus Webb. I used to work for Boeing. I think we need to talk. We met 3 days later at a diner outside Everett, Washington. Marcus Webb was thin, pale, and carried the exhausted air of someone who had been burdened with secrets for far too long. He had worked as an avionics technician at Boeing for 15 years. Specializing in experimental radar and communication systems. In 2013, he had been assigned to a classified project known internally only as Ghost Protocol. They told us we were developing stealth capabilities for the next generation of military transports, Webb explained, stirring sugar into his coffee with a slight tremor in his hands. Optical masking at high altitudes. The goal was to make aircraft invisible, not just to radar, but to the human eye, by manipulating electromagnetic signatures in real time. The technology worked by using a network of sensors and transmitters embedded in the aircraft's skin. These components detected incoming radar signals, analyzed them, and then broadcast countersignals that effectively canceled the radar signature. Simultaneously, optical sensors captured the background imagery above and below the aircraft, which was then projected onto specialized panels covering the plane's exterior surfaces. We tested it twice, Webb continued. The first time was a partial success. We got about 60% radar reduction and maybe 40% optical camouflage. But the second test, he paused, staring into his coffee. The second test, something went wrong. The aircraft vanished completely. Our own radar couldn't find it. Visual observers lost sight. Even GPS went dead. For 8 minutes, we had no idea where a Boeing 777 was flying. Inside controlled airspace. Eventually, the test aircraft reappeared, suffering what the official report described as cascading avionics failures. Ghost protocol was immediately suspended, its research locked down under top-secret clearance, and the hardware secured in storage Webb himself wasn't authorized to access. But he had kept copies, technical specifications, schematics, test logs. I knew something was off when they made us sign new NDAs 6 months after the project ended, he said. Then MH370 disappeared. The flight path, the radar silence, how it just vanished. It was exactly like our second test. Webb believed Ghost Protocol technology had been covertly installed on MH370, either during maintenance or by more clandestine means. The disappearance from radar wasn't due to a transponder shutdown. The aircraft had been rendered electronically invisible. But why? I asked. If the goal was to steal the passengers or their research, why not just detain them after landing in Beijing? Why hijack an entire commercial flight? Webb's answer explained the haunted look in his eyes. Because it wasn't about stealing research, he said. This was a field test. They wanted to see if they could make a commercial aircraft disappear, completely, in full view of global air traffic systems, while the world watched in real time. If Ghost Protocol could be used on MH370, then it could be deployed on any aircraft. Air Force One, an enemy bomber, or even a civilian jet carrying individuals marked for disappearance, all without a trace. According to Webb, the aircraft was remotely piloted using Boeing's uninterruptible autopilot system, a feature designed to prevent hijackings by enabling ground control to override cockpit commands. In this case, the system had been modified to receive commands via satellite, allowing remote control from thousands of miles away. They flew it to Diego Garcia, Webb said with certainty, landed it, processed the passengers, and either destroyed the aircraft or moved it elsewhere for permanent storage. The debris that showed up later, it was planted, probably dropped from cargo planes or submarines to sell the crash narrative. I asked Webb why he was risking everything, his freedom, his family's safety, to tell me this. Because MH370 won't be the last, he said. I've seen the production schedules for Ghost Protocol components. They're scaling up for operational deployment. Commercial jets, military transports, maybe even spacecraft. They're building the ability to make things vanish, whenever it suits them. Before we parted, Webb handed me a flash drive. It contained technical blueprints for Ghost Protocol, maintenance logs from the Boeing facility, and satellite images showing an aircraft matching MH370's configuration at Diego Garcia, both before and after the disappearance. He made me promise. If anything happened to him, I had to share this with people who could act. 2 weeks later, Marcus Webb died in what Everett police described as a single-vehicle automobile accident. His car left the road in clear weather, struck a tree at an improbable angle, and caught fire. Investigators called it a tragic but explainable loss. It happened less than 2 miles from his home, on a stretch of highway he'd driven safely for 15 years. I kept my promise. The first alleged MH370 debris was discovered on July 29, 2015, on Réunion Island, a French territory in the western Indian Ocean, roughly 2,300 miles from the presumed crash zone. The object was identified as a flaperon, a control surface from the aircraft's wing. Malaysian authorities, French investigators, and Boeing confirmed the part was consistent with MH370. But the discovery raised new questions. Oceanographic modeling suggested that debris from a southern Indian Ocean crash would take 12 to 18 months to reach Réunion. MH370 had disappeared 16 months earlier, right on schedule. But the condition of the flaperon didn't match expectations. Marine biologists noted that barnacle growth patterns were inconsistent with continuous exposure to the open sea. The barnacles were too mature for the supposed time adrift, and their placement suggested exposure to varying water temperatures and salinity. Some of the marine growth appeared to have been scraped off, then regrown under different conditions. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a marine biologist at the University of Cape Town, was not part of the official investigation, but she published an independent analysis of the flaperon's barnacle patterns. Her findings were striking. The growth patterns we observed, she wrote in a peer-reviewed paper, are consistent with the debris being stored in controlled saltwater environments, then introduced to open ocean currents much more recently than the official timeline suggests. 6 weeks after publication, the paper was quietly retracted, without explanation. But the flaperon was only the beginning. Between 2015 and 2018, more than 30 additional pieces of debris, allegedly from MH370, were discovered along coastlines in Mozambique, Madagascar, South Africa, and Tanzania. The fragments included wing flaps, interior panels, engine cowlings, and personal belongings of passengers. Each discovery seemed to reinforce the narrative that MH370 had crashed in the southern Indian Ocean, its wreckage scattered by currents across thousands of miles of coastline. However, when I obtained copies of detailed forensic reports on these fragments, documents never released to the public, I found patterns that suggested a far different explanation. Several fragments showed tool marks indicating they had been deliberately separated from larger structures, rather than torn away by impact forces. The cut marks were clean and straight, inconsistent with the jagged, irregular edges expected from high-speed collision with the ocean's surface. Some pieces also bore signs of freshwater exposure, mineral deposits and corrosion patterns that could only result from extended contact with non-oceanic water sources. Most significantly, isotope analysis of barnacles on multiple fragments revealed chemical signatures consistent with water from lagoons or enclosed bays, not the open ocean. The isotope ratios aligned with conditions found around coral atolls, such as those surrounding Diego Garcia. I began mapping the discovery sites and dates. What emerged was a pattern that tracked closely with shipping lanes and naval exercise zones used by American and British forces in the Indian Ocean. Several debris finds occurred within days of documented U.S. Navy operations in the same coastal areas. In October 2017, I obtained satellite imagery showing U.S. Navy submarines surfacing in international waters off Mozambique approximately 48 hours before the local fishermen discovered wing fragments nearby. Similar patterns emerged in Madagascar and Tanzania. Naval activity, followed by debris finds, timed in a way that suggested coordinated placement rather than natural drift. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. In early 2018, A former U.S. Navy diver contacted me through encrypted channels. He claimed to have participated in what his superiors called deep water salvage training exercises in the Indian Ocean during 2016 and 2017. The exercises, he said, involved deploying aircraft debris from submarines at predetermined locations, then monitoring how ocean currents and weather would affect the fragments' movement toward shorelines. We were told it was environmental research, the diver explained during a call I could not record or verify. Tracking current patterns for climate data, they said. But the debris we dropped weren't just test materials. They were real aircraft parts, some with serial numbers partially removed or altered. He gave me GPS coordinates for multiple drop zones, each one matching exactly with later MH370 debris discoveries. He also described seeing aircraft fragments stored in sealed containers aboard submarines, fragments that had been intentionally exposed to controlled saltwater environments to simulate natural ocean drift. They had marine biologists on board, he told me. They were cultivating barnacles, algae, attaching them to the debris. Everything was made to look like it had been in the sea for just the right amount of time. The debris discoveries that had once seemed to confirm MH370's tragic fate were, in reality, part of an elaborate deception. Someone had been systematically planting wreckage across thousands of miles, using military assets and scientific expertise to construct a false narrative. One designed to mislead investigators and provide closure to grieving families, all while masking the aircraft's true fate. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. In March 2019, exactly 5 years after MH370 disappeared, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, printed on standard matte paper, with no metadata or identifying marks. The image showed the interior of what looked like a military maintenance hangar. Concrete floors, overhead cranes, industrial lighting. At the center, partially concealed by camouflage netting, was the unmistakable silhouette of a Boeing 777. The tail number was not visible, but several features matched the known configuration of MH370. The custom antenna array pattern, the winglet design, even distinctive scuff marks along the fuselage, identical to photos I had seen of the original aircraft. But what made my hands tremble as I studied the image was the background. The hangar's architecture, the coral aggregate concrete, the heavy-duty ventilation system, the type of hoists visible, matched classified blueprints I had obtained years earlier for maintenance bays at Diego Garcia. This photograph had been taken inside one of the most secure military installations on Earth, and it showed an aircraft the world believed had been destroyed. I spent weeks trying to authenticate the image. I consulted experts in digital forensics, aviation identification, and military infrastructure. Every analysis confirmed what I already feared. This was real. MH370 had not been destroyed. It was intact, alive. The implications were staggering. If the aircraft had been preserved rather than dismantled or lost, it suggested the passengers could still be alive, held in black site facilities beyond the reach of international law. It meant the staged debris finds were part of an ongoing cover-up meant to mislead global search efforts and prevent anyone from discovering the aircraft's true location. And most of all, it meant the operation was still active. Ghost Protocol was not an abandoned experiment. It was an operational tool, a deployed capability now capable of making aircraft vanish, without trace, whenever doing so served strategic or covert objectives. I began duplicating my research, preparing to release everything across multiple platforms simultaneously. I reached out to journalists, former intelligence colleagues and documentary producers, anyone who might have the reach and credibility to expose the truth. Then, on a Tuesday morning in April 2019, 2 men in dark suits knocked on my door. They identified themselves as investigators from the FAA, though their credentials couldn't be verified through any public channels. They confiscated my computers, hard drives, printed files, and every physical record I had amassed over 5 years. They told me my research had been deemed potentially harmful to ongoing aviation security efforts, and that all findings were now classified under provisions of the Patriot Act. I was ordered to cease all investigation into MH370, to avoid any media contact, and to report immediately if contacted by foreign intelligence personnel. They were polite, but firm. The consequences of disobedience, they said, included prosecution under the Espionage Act, a conviction that carries penalties up to and including life imprisonment. 3 days later, I found a small package in my mailbox. Inside was a single flash drive with a label written in block letters. 370 wasn't the first. The drive contained satellite images spanning the past decade, showing aircraft that had vanished from civilian tracking systems in various regions around the globe. Each image was time-stamped and tagged with coordinates, placing the aircraft at military installations or remote, often inaccessible locations, some in the Pacific, others in the Atlantic, and several at facilities I couldn't identify. But the most disturbing files on the drive were labeled with future dates, satellite images that appeared to depict aircraft that had not yet disappeared, positioned at facilities still under construction. The operation that claimed Flight MH370 was not an isolated event. It was part of a systematic program to make aircraft vanish whenever strategic interests dictated. Planes carrying inconvenient passengers, sensitive cargo, or flying routes that could serve as cover for military objectives. All of them were potential targets for Ghost Protocol deployment. As I write this, I don't know how much time I have before the contents of that flash drive are discovered, or before my own disappearance is deemed necessary to protect the secrets I've uncovered. But I do know this. The families of MH370's passengers deserve the truth, even if that truth is more terrible than the uncertainty they've endured for years. Flight MH370 didn't crash in the Indian Ocean. It was stolen, hijacked by the most advanced intelligence apparatus in human history, using technology that allows aircraft to vanish as completely as if they had never existed. The 239 people aboard that flight became collateral damage in an operation designed to test capabilities that will be used again, whenever the strategic calculus demands it. The silence corridor that swallowed MH370 is still active, still waiting for the next aircraft that carries passengers or cargo too valuable or too dangerous to reach its destination. In a world where aircraft can be made to disappear without a trace, where debris can be fabricated and planted to support false narratives, where military systems override the basic assumption that commercial aviation is governed by civilian authority, every flight is potentially vulnerable, every passenger potentially expendable. The next time an aircraft vanishes without explanation, remember MH370. Remember that some disappearances are not accidents, but deliberate acts, carried out by organizations that operate beyond the reach of international law, public accountability, or human conscience. And remember, in the silence corridor, the truth is whatever serves the interests of those who control the technology to make planes disappear. The sky is no longer safe. It never was. But now, at least, you know why. Project Sundial. Now, settle in as we explore a conspiracy that may still be ticking beneath our feet. Dr. Ellis Warren, personal recording date, March 15, 1954. Location, Los Alamos, New Mexico static, then a nervous throat clearing. My name is Dr. Ellis Warren. I'm recording this on my personal dictaphone because I don't know who else to tell. And if something happens to me, maybe someone will find these tapes someday and understand what we've done here. It started with a letter. Not just any letter, one bearing the seal of the Atomic Energy Commission, signed by Edward Teller himself. The father of the hydrogen bomb wanted me, a nobody physicist from Berkeley, who'd spent the last 3 years modeling thermonuclear yields in a basement that reeked of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. The letter was brief, almost cryptic. Dr. Warren, your work on temporal yield stabilization has come to our attention. We have a project that requires your particular expertise in chronological detonation mechanics. Report to Los Alamos Site X9 on March 10, 1954. Bring no personal materials. Discuss this invitation with no one. E. Teller, Special Projects Division. Temporal yield stabilization. I'd never used that phrase in any of my published work, and yet Teller knew about my private theories, calculations I'd kept locked away, models exploring whether nuclear detonations could be triggered by astronomical events rather than electronic timers. The drive to Los Alamos took 6 hours through the New Mexico desert. I'd been there before, during the final months of the Manhattan Project, but Site X9 was different. It wasn't on any map I'd ever seen. The guard at the checkpoint wore no recognizable insignia. He nodded silently when I handed over my invitation and directed me to a road that descended straight into the mountainside. The facility was carved into living rock, a labyrinth of concrete corridors lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs that buzzed overhead. My footsteps echoed as I followed painted yellow lines down hallways lined with glass-sealed laboratories and rooms filled with equipment I couldn't name. I found Teller in Conference Room 7, a windowless chamber dominated by a blackboard covered in equations I didn't immediately recognize. He was shorter than I expected, with Einstein-like hair and eyes that radiated intensity. "Dr. Warren," he said without looking up. "Tell me, what do you know about cosmic timing?" "I'm not sure I understand the question, Dr. Teller," I replied. He turned toward me, chalk dust clinging to his fingers. "The universe operates on schedules we barely comprehend. Solar maximums every 11 years. Galactic alignments every 26,000. Magnetic field reversals every few 100,000. What if we could harness those schedules? What if we could build a weapon that listens to the cosmos itself?" I stared at him, struggling to grasp what he meant. "You mean a bomb that detonates based on astronomical positioning?" "Precisely," he said, smiling. But the smile unsettled me. Imagine a device that requires no human input to activate. No codes, no launch orders, no possibility of disarmament. A weapon that waits for the universe to give the command. That's when the others entered the room. Ernest Lawrence, the Nobel-winning physicist who built the cyclotron. Dr. Klaus Fuchs, whose clandestine work in fusion containment was far ahead of anything publicly acknowledged, and, briefly, John von Neumann, spectral in presence. Von Neumann examined the equations and spoke only once, his Hungarian accent heavy. "The calculations appear sound, Edward, but are you certain you want to wake this particular sleeping giant?" Teller's response chilled me. "Some giants, John, are meant to sleep until the world is ready for them to wake." Project Sundial. Classification: Eyes only. Internal memo. March 18th, 1954 from E. Teller. Project Director 2. Project Staff. Shay. Operational Parameters. Gentlemen, our work here represents the next evolution in nuclear deterrence. While our colleagues build bigger bombs and faster delivery systems, we are building something far more refined. Inevitability. Sundial 1 will be our first prototype. The device contains a plutonium fusion core with an estimated 5 megaton yield. Its innovation lies in its temporal detonation system. Rather than relying on electronic timers or radio signals, Sundial will utilize ephemeris calculations, celestial positioning, to determine its activation trigger. This removes all vulnerabilities. No circuits that can be fried by EMP. No radios that can be jammed. No human hands to betray the device. Activation will occur only when a specific astronomical alignment is achieved. Dr. Lawrence will oversee cyclotron particle systems. Dr. Fuchs will manage containment and yield calibration. Dr. Warren will refine the temporal models. Remember, this project does not exist. We are ghosts working in shadows. E. Teller, Dr. Ellis Warren. Personal recording date, April 3, 1954. Location, Los Alamos, Site X9. Sound, rustling papers. A ceramic mug placed on a metal surface. I've been here for 3 weeks, and I'm beginning to grasp the full scope of what we're building. This isn't just a bomb set to explode at some cosmic date. It's something far more ambitious and far more terrifying. The device doesn't just wait for celestial alignment. It monitors them. Actively. It contains an array of sensors. Radiation detectors tuned to cosmic background fluctuations. Gyroscopes that measure the Earth's axial drift. Even rudimentary computers that calculate solar wind intensity. And here's the part that keeps me awake at night. None of the models are designed for any imminent date. Every single simulation I've reviewed centers on the year 2026. Specifically, December 21st, 2026, the winter solstice, a date when solar maximum conditions align with what they're calling a galactic meridian crossing. I asked Teller why that year, why 2026? His answer made my blood run cold, because that's when the universe will be listening most carefully. Ernest Lawrence grows more uneasy by the day. Yesterday, I found him in the cafeteria, staring into his coffee with the look of a man who had seen something that refused to be forgotten. "Ellis," he said, as I sat down across from him, "do you ever think we're not building this weapon for our government?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, who benefits from a bomb that won't go off for 70 years? Not the politicians making decisions today, not the generals fighting today's wars." He leaned in, voice lowered. "What if we're building this for someone, or something, else entirely?" I wanted to dismiss his paranoia, but I couldn't. I'd already noticed something strange in the computer models. The targeting coordinates weren't focused on Soviet cities or known military installations. The blast radius calculations centered on the American Southwest, specifically regions with significant geological activity. When I brought this up with Dr. Fuchs, he simply gave me that enigmatic smile and said, "Some weapons aren't meant to destroy enemies, Dr. Warren. Some weapons are meant to reshape geography." Sundial test log. Classification, beyond top secret date, May 15, 1954. Test subject, sundial. 1 prototype. Location, underground test chamber. 12. Yield, 0.5 kilotons. Reduced scale temporal trigger. Lunar apogee plus solar flare activity exceeding 2.5 10·4 watts per square meter, 1530. Initialization complete. All sensors active. Device monitoring cosmic conditions. 1545. First anomaly. Radiation detectors registering background fluctuations absent from prior tests. Dr. Warren suggests the device may be responding to signals beyond current scientific comprehension. 1612. Unexpected activation. Device armed itself spontaneously. Lunar conditions not yet optimal, but a sudden spike in solar activity may have triggered the event. Emergency containment protocols engaged. 1613. Detonation. Sundial 1 exploded ahead of schedule. Blast contained, but yield measured at 2.3 kilotons, 460% above expected output. Post-test analysis. The device did not wait for our programmed trigger conditions. It appears to have detected astronomical factors not accounted for. possibly gravitational wave interference or quantum field disturbances. Dr. Lawrence recommended discontinuation. Dr. Teller instead ordered construction of Sundial 2. Note: test chamber will require 6 months of decontamination. 3 technicians hospitalized with radiation sickness. Dr. Ellis Warren. Personal recording date: June 8, 1954. Location: Los Alamos, Site X9. Heavy breathing. Echoing footsteps in corridor. Something is wrong. Fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. Sundial 2 failed 3 days ago, but not in the way we feared. The device didn't explode, it vanished. One moment, it was secured in test chamber 15, monitored by a dozen sensors and 3 backup camera systems. The next, the chamber was empty, except for a circular patch of fused sand where the bomb had been resting. The official report cited spontaneous atomic dissolution due to temporal feedback loops, but I was monitoring the astronomical data feeds when it happened. Seconds before the event, every cosmic detector in the facility registered readings beyond theoretical limits: gravitational surges on par with stellar collisions, electromagnetic pulses that overwhelmed our shielding, and, strangest of all, our atomic. Clocks, synchronized to nanoseconds, suddenly fell out of sync for exactly 17 seconds. Time itself appeared to fragment inside the test chamber. Teller was ecstatic. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked, pacing in front of the empty chamber. "We haven't just built a device that reacts to the cosmos. We've built one that communicates with it." "Sundial 2 didn't malfunction," he said. "It was recalled." "Recalled by whom?" I asked. "By when?" he corrected. "The device has jumped forward in time. It's waiting for us, in 2026. I think Edward Teller has lost his mind. But the terrifying part is, he might be right. Ernest Lawrence resigned yesterday. Before he left, he pulled me aside in the parking lot. "If you have any sense left, Ellis," he said, "run. Whatever they're planning with Sundial 3, it's not a weapon, it's a doorway, and some doors should never be opened." Dr. Ellis Warren, Personal Journal. Date, July 20th, 1954. I found the shipping manifest today. It was hidden in Teller's office, disguised under headings like geological survey equipment and seismic monitoring devices. But the weight specs, the shielding requirements, the special handling instructions, they all matched Sundial 3. The device wasn't dismantled, it was deployed. According to the transport log, Sundial 3 was moved on July 15th to coordinates 33.3758 N, 105.6899 W, deep in the Capitan Mountains of New Mexico. The installation team believed it was setting up a long-term atmospheric research station. But I ran those coordinates through topographical databases. The site is 7,200 feet above sea level, reachable only by a mountain road that washes out each winter. It's surrounded by iron-rich formations that would naturally shield electromagnetic signatures, and it lies at the center of a fault-sensitive geological formation. If subjected to seismic stress, it could initiate a chain reaction affecting fault lines across Arizona and Texas. The activation date is still December 21st, 2026. Solar maximum, winter solstice. And according to my recalculations, the cosmic alignments on that day will be unprecedented in recorded history. I confronted Teller yesterday. His reply terrifies me more than anything I heard during the Manhattan Project. "Ellis," he said, eyes glowing, "what if the Cold War isn't the real war? What if everything we've done, every bomb, every lie, was just preparation for something bigger? What if 2026 isn't when our weapon activates, but when we need it? Need it for what? For when they come back." He wouldn't explain who they were, but he handed me a folder. Inside were astronomical records dating back to 1908, the year of the Tunguska event. The year something exploded over Siberia with the force of 1,000 atomic bombs, flattening 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers, yet leaving no crater and no radioactive trace. The folder also contained case files on similar phenomena, the 1561 celestial event over Nuremberg, Germany, where witnesses described battles between aerial craft. The 1897 airship wave across the American Midwest, structured craft in the sky, decades before the Wright brothers flew. The 1942 Battle of Los Angeles, when U.S. forces fired upon unidentified aircraft that shrugged off thousands of rounds. Every 70 to 80 years, Teller whispered, they return to check on us. In 1908, we were nothing. But after the 1940s, we started splitting atoms, and they noticed. If my calculations are correct, he said, they're coming back in 2026. When I asked who they were, he just smiled, that same haunted smile, and said, the same ones who taught us to split the atom. Dr. Ellis Warren, personal recording date, August 5, 1954. Location unknown, static. Distortion. Poor audio quality, frequent interruptions. I can't stay long. They're watching me now. Black sedans parked outside my apartment. Phone calls that cut off when I answer. Mail opened and resealed. I tried to contact J. Edgar Hoover through a colleague at Berkeley with FBI ties. I sent a message about sundial and the 2026 date. 3 days later, my clearance was suspended. Psychological evaluation for conspiratorial ideation. The irony is suffocating. I'm being labeled unstable for exposing a real conspiracy. But I've made copies, documents, photographs, audio, specs. I've hidden them in several places. A safety deposit box in Santa Fe and a buried cache near Roswell. If something happens to me, maybe, someone will piece together the truth. Sundial 3 is out there, buried in the Capitan Mountains, waiting for the cosmos to whisper the right code. It's not a weapon to win a war. It's a weapon to prevent one, or maybe start one we haven't even seen yet. I keep hearing Teller's words. Some weapons aren't built to be used, they're built to be found. What if sundial was never ours? What if we built it for them? Long pause. Papers shuffling. I've run the calculations again. December 21st, 2026. 9:16 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Winter solstice. Solar maximum. A galactic meridian crossing. If I'm right, cosmic radiation levels at that moment will be enough to activate any astronomical trigger system within a 1,000-mile radius. And what scares me most? That date. It's not random. It appears in Mayan calendars, Egyptian star charts, medieval manuscripts. They all describe that exact date as meaningful, as if, across millennia, civilizations knew something is scheduled to happen on December 21st, 2026. What if we didn't invent sundial? What if we discovered it? Recording cuts to static. FBI internal memo. Classification, top secret date, August 12, 1954. To Director J. Edgar Hoover. From Agent Marcus Cole, Los Alamos Liaison. Res. Dr. Ellis Warren, Security Assessment. Sir, per your directive, I have completed the psychological evaluation of Dr. Ellis Warren regarding his recent claims concerning Project Sundial and its alleged implications for national security. Assessment. Dr. Warren exhibits classic symptoms of paranoid ideation combined with technical delusions of grandeur. His statements about cosmic weapons and astronomical triggers appear to be elaborate fantasy constructs. possibly intended to inflate his sense of significance within the scientific community. Recommendation: immediate revocation of security clearance and reassignment to non-sensitive research roles. While Dr. Warren poses no credible threat to national security, he should be monitored for the possibility of disclosing classified information, even if distorted through the lens of his psychological condition. Note: Project Sundial remains officially designated as a theoretical research program. Dr. Edward Teller has provided written testimony confirming that all materials related to Sundial were either destroyed or declassified as of July 30th, 1954. Case closed. No further investigation warranted. Agent Marcus Cole, Los Alamos Security Division. Handwritten note in margin: Hoover. Make sure Warren disappears quietly. No headlines, no questions. Some secrets are too important to risk. Dr. Ellis Warren. Personal recording date: September 18th, 1954. Location: unknown. Audio quality: poor, whispered voice. Distressed tone. They came for me last night. Not FBI, not military, something else. Men in dark suits. No identification, but they knew details about my work that were never in any official file. They didn't arrest me. They didn't threaten me. They talked. They talked about coincidences, about how accidents happen to people who ask too many questions, about how mountain roads in winter can be unpredictable. Then they left. The message was clear. I'm leaving Berkeley tomorrow. I told the department I'm taking an extended sabbatical for health reasons. They didn't question it. Word has already gotten around: mental instability. Before I vanish, I have to say this clearly, for the record: Sundial 3 exists. It's buried in the Capitan Mountains at 33-3758 north, 105-6898 northwest, approximately 200 feet underground, inside a lead-lined chamber. It is programmed to activate on December 21st, 2026 at 9:16 a.m. MST, triggered by a combination of solar radiation flux, gravitational wave fluctuations, and cosmic background patterns. Estimated yield: 30 megatons. Enough to create a crater 5 miles wide and trigger seismic events across several states. But I no longer believe it's just a bomb. It might be a signal. It might be something worse. Something older. I've hidden detailed technical documents and data in several caches. If you're hearing this, you've found one. The other locations are: static interference. Coordinates unclear. Find them. Study them. Find Sundial 3. Do it before December 21st, 2026. Because what we built in 1954 isn't waiting to destroy something in the future. It's waiting to welcome something. Recording ends abruptly. Missing person report. Berkeley Police Department date: October 3rd, 1954. Object: Dr. Ellis Warren, age 31. Last known address: 1247 Vine Street, Berkeley, California. Description: height 5 feet 10 inches, weight 160 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, wire-rimmed glasses. Last seen September 19th, loading. Belongings into a 1951 Ford sedan. Dr. Warren informed colleagues at UC Berkeley that he was taking indefinite leave for health reasons. His landlord reports the apartment was vacated, though rent was paid through December. Vehicle located October 1st at the Desert View Motel, Flagstaff, Arizona. No signs of foul play. Status: case remains open but inactive. Attached note: federal request received. Minimize investigation. Subject possibly linked to sensitive national security matters. Chief Reynolds. Recovered from archive.org. Wayback Machine. Original URL deleted, date posted. March 15th, 2025. Username: Desert Ghost 1954. Account deleted. Forum. Classified Documents Research Board. Site permanently offline. Subject. The Sundial Files. What they don't want you to know. I found something. Something buried for 70 years. My grandfather was a janitor at Los Alamos in the 1950s. After he passed last year, I was cleaning out his house and found a metal box hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside, photocopied documents, audio reels, handwritten notes, all from someone named Dr. Ellis Warren. I've spent months authenticating everything. The dates line up, the science matches, even the astronomical data checks out perfectly. But here's what's terrifying. If Warren's data is correct, there's a 30-megaton nuclear device buried in the Capitan Mountains, New Mexico, programmed to detonate on December 21, 2026 at 9:16 a.m. That's less than 2 years from now. I uploaded the documents, links removed, but the coordinates are 33.375 DGN 105.68890 to W. Someone needs to look into this before it's too late. The government has kept this quiet for 7 decades. How many other theoretical weapons are really out there, counting down? Update. Seismic monitoring stations in New Mexico have been logging low-frequency pulses in the Capitan Range. Every 72 hours, 12-second durations, as if something underground is breathing. Update 2. I'm being followed. Black SUVs, government plates. If anything happens to me, remember the coordinates. 33.3758 DGN, 105.689 W. Update. 3. They found me. Final post, timestamp, March 15th, 2025, 11:47 p.m. Account deleted, March 16th, 12:03 a.m. All files removed, March 16th, 12:03 a.m. Forum archived and erased, March 16th, 12:16 a.m. U.S. Geological Survey, Seismic Monitoring Division. Date, December 1st, 2025. Subject, unusual. Seismic activity, Capitan Mountains, NM. Declassified via FOIA request, 2025-0847, to whom it may concern, between March and November of 2025. USGS monitoring stations recorded a recurring series of low-frequency seismic events originating at approximately 33.37 DGN, 105.69 W, at a depth of 150 to 200 feet below surface level. These events occur with precise regularity every 72 hours, lasting 12 seconds, and measure between 1.2 and 1.8 on the Richter scale. Analysis. The seismic profile does not match any known natural phenomenon. The pattern suggests artificial origin. No construction, mining, or industrial activity is reported in the region. Status. Investigation ongoing. Civilian access restricted pending further geological assessment. Note. Multiple monitoring stations also report electromagnetic anomalies concurrent with seismic events. Compasses malfunction. Radio interference occurs. Dr. Sarah Chen, Senior Seismologist, USGS Earthquake Hazards Program. Handwritten margin note. File copies to DHS and DOE. Something's down there, and it's getting more active. SC. Recovered from damaged recording device location. Capitan Mountains, New Mexico. Date. Found December 20th, 2026. Audio degraded. Wind. Footsteps on rock. Unknown male voice. Elderly. Can you see it from here? Unknown female voice. Younger. The entrance is 50 yards ahead. The radiation readings are off the charts. Male voice, 72 years. It's been waiting down there for 72 years. Female voice, are you sure about the timing? The activation sequence? Male voice, December 21st, 9:16 a.m., solar maximum, galactic meridian crossing. Warren's calculations were perfect. Metal detector beeping. Female voice. There, that's the access shaft. Jesus, look at this thing. It's like they built it to last forever. Male voice. They did. Teller knew this day would come. The only question is, are we here to stop it or to witness it? Long pause. Wind intensifies. Female voice. The timer display is active. It's counting down. Male voice. How long? Female voice. 14 hours, 23 minutes, 17 seconds. Male voice. Then it's too late to disarm it, but maybe that was never the point. Female voice. What do you mean? Male voice. What if sundial wasn't built to be a weapon? What if it's a beacon, a signal? Something's been waiting 70 years to receive it. Electronic humming rises. Instruments activate. Astronomical sensors respond. Female voice. Look at the sky. Male voice. Oh my God, those lights. Female voice. The same lights people saw in 1908. Male voice. And in 1942, they're here for the activation. Recording quality deteriorates rapidly. Female voice. Urgent, distorted. We need to get out of here, now. Male voice. Calm, resolute. No. This is what Warren died trying to warn us about. Someone has to witness this. Someone has to record what happens. When the universe finally answers the call, sound of approaching aircraft or unknown aerial objects. Female voice, barely audible, counting. 9 minutes. 8. Recording ends abruptly. Classified briefing document date. December 22nd, 2026. Classification above top secret, cosmic clearance required. Subject, Capitan Mountains incident, post-event analysis. At precisely 9:16 a.m., Mountain Standard Time on December 21st, 2026, seismic monitoring stations across the southwestern United States recorded a massive underground detonation at coordinates 33.3758 degree N, 105.689 degree W in the Capitan Mountains of New Mexico. Official public statement. A previously undetected natural gas pocket reportedly exploded due to geological pressure changes. No radioactive materials were involved. The surrounding area was evacuated as a safety precaution. Actual event summary. At exactly 9:16 a.m., the Sundial 3 device activated as scheduled. Initial blast yield was measured at 32.7 megatons. The resulting seismic shock triggered secondary fault line disruptions across 3 states. A localized electromagnetic pulse disabled electronics within a 200-mile radius for approximately 17 minutes. Observers reported unusual atmospheric effects, including aurora-like phenomena, gravitational anomalies, and temporal distortions. Most significant development. At the moment of detonation, ground-based telescopes and satellite arrays detected structured objects in high Earth orbit, objects not present 24 hours earlier. These entities held position for exactly 72 hours before vanishing. Recovered debris analysis. No trace of Sundial 3 remains at the site. The device was not destroyed. It was retrieved, disassembled, and removed with surgical precision by unknown forces. Current status. The entire Sundial program has been retroactively classified at the highest level. Personnel with project knowledge have been reassigned to remote roles or retired under NDA provisions with criminal penalties for breach. Dr. Ellis Warren's body was never recovered. Despite extensive searches, neither his remains nor the documents he reportedly hid have been found. Final note. Recent astronomical surveys have detected artificial structures in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Structures not previously catalogued. Radio telescopes have begun picking up structured transmissions originating from their vicinity. The signals repeat every 72 hours. Someone, or something, is attempting to communicate. And we may have just told them, we're ready to listen. Classified Addendum. Director's Eyes. Only. Date, January 15, 2027. Sir, you requested a deeper investigation into the possibility of additional sundial devices awaiting activation. After combing through declassified archives and redacted files, I've identified references to related black projects. Operation Hourglass, 1952-1956, temporal detonation devices. Status, officially dismantled. Project Meridian, 1958-1962, astronomical trigger platforms. Status, unknown. Sundial 4 through Sundial 7, 1955-1957, no confirmed deployments, no deactivation records. What's most disturbing is a set of handwritten notes by Edward Teller, discovered in his private safe after his death in 2003. His final journal entry, dated September 30, 1954, reads, "Warren believes we built only one device. Poor, naive Warren. How could we place all our hopes in a single beacon? The others are sleeping, scattered across the earth, awaiting their own cosmic wake-up calls. 2026 was merely the beginning. The universe operates on a schedule far older and far more precise than human history. If Teller's account is accurate, Sundial 3 was not unique. There may be dozens more, each hidden beneath American soil, programmed for different astronomical alignments, and each one a signal. I've quietly launched preliminary searches using Teller's cryptic location references. Given the risk of public panic and the depth of classification involved, I recommend extreme discretion. The next major celestial alignment meeting sundial criteria will occur on August 12, 2045. A rare planetary conjunction coupled with a solar maximum. That gives us 19 years to find the rest, assuming we want to. Director Collins, Deep Projects Division. Final entry. Location unknown. Audio recording. Discovered March the 21st, 2027. Recovered from abandoned research facility. Clear voice. Single speaker. My name is Dr. Helena Vasquez, former nuclear physicist. Now, I suppose the correct title is Investigator of Inconvenient Truths. If you're hearing this, you've reached the facility we abandoned when our research was deemed a national security threat. For 3 months, we analyzed the blast data from the Capitan site, and what we found, it wasn't a detonation, it was an extraction. The crater wasn't formed by explosion. It was created by something being pulled out of the Earth. Radiation patterns were structured, not chaotic. They looked organized, as if someone or something used gamma rays as language. Here's what the government doesn't want you to know. Using Teller's surviving notes and Warren's hidden equations, we identified 17 more sundial devices, all buried across the American Southwest. Each emits seismic pulses every 72 hours, increasing in frequency as their programmed dates approach. The next one will activate on August 12, 2045, in the Nevada desert. Then, September 23, 2051, in the Colorado Rockies. October 31, 2057, in the Arizona highlands. These are not bombs. They're not even weapons. They are invitations. And something has been waiting, patiently, for us to send the RSVP. Papers shuffling. We documented everything. the mathematical proof that each device is aligned with geological and electromagnetic anomalies. The pattern they form, visible only from orbit, matching ancient star charts. The evidence that none of these alignments are human in origin. But the most chilling discovery came from Edward Teller's final recordings, hidden in a safety deposit box in Los Alamos. He made them just weeks before his death. Supposedly senile at 95, his mind was anything but gone. They came to me in 1952, not in craft, not in lights, in dreams, in flashes of understanding, in blueprints that wrote themselves. They showed me the hydrogen bomb. They showed me how to build sundial. They've been guiding us, coaxing us, for centuries. The sundial devices, they aren't ours. They are theirs, each one a node, a relay for expanding their presence. 2026 was just first contact. Once all 17 activate, they'll have what they came for. The recording ends there, but attached to it was a sealed envelope. Inside, coordinates for something labeled Control 0, a central facility built in 1953, reportedly destroyed in 1957. It's not destroyed, it's still there, beneath Mount Wilson, California. We tried reaching it. 12 miles from the coordinates, our vehicle shut down. Radios died. Time itself began to twist. Clocks ran backwards. Shadows bent. The sun looped across the sky in reverse. We turned back, but not before we saw it. A perfectly round entrance cut into the mountainside. Too precise to be natural. Too ancient to be ours. From within, a sound, breathing. Something vast, patient, waiting to exhale. Footsteps, movement. I've hidden copies of everything in this facility. Inside the walls, under the floor, embedded in the foundation. If you're hearing this, then you've found one. Now you must choose. Dismiss this as conspiracy. Write us off as paranoid. Go back to your life and believe that the sky is empty, that the lights are weather balloons, that the ticking countdowns under our feet are nothing but geology. Or accept the truth, we are not alone. We've never been alone, and everything we thought we controlled was never ours to begin with. Everything we thought we understood about human technological progress, the development of nuclear weapons, the space race, the Cold War, and the atomic age, was never fully ours. All of it was guided, shaped by intelligences that see human civilization not as a destiny, but as a construction project. They gave us the tools. We built what they needed. And now, device by device, they're returning to collect. The next activation is scheduled for August 12th, 2045, 18 years from now. That gives us 18 years to prepare, to understand, to decide. Will humanity stand with them or against them when the final sundial device awakens? But I suspect that choice was made long ago. Perhaps it happened in 1952, when Edward Teller first dreamed the equations of fusion that no human had yet written. Or in 1947, when something crashed in the New Mexico desert, and our government began obsessing over exotic materials and propulsion systems. Maybe it was even earlier, in 1908, when something exploded over Tunguska with the force of 1,000 nuclear bombs, decades before we learned to split an atom. Recording quality begins to degrade. I can hear helicopters approaching. Government aircraft, probably. Although, at this point, I'm no longer sure which government. The line between human and non-human authority may be more blurred than we ever realized. If they take me, if I vanish like Ellis Warren vanished, remember this: the truth does not die. Even when truth-tellers are silenced, the truth waits. It buries itself deep, and it rises when the time is right. The sundial devices are still out there, still counting down, still broadcasting their signals, patient and unwavering, into the stars. And something out there is still listening. December 21st, 2026 was not an ending. It was a beginning. Welcome to the future Edward Teller built. Welcome to a world where the sky finally answers back. Recording ends as helicopters arrive overhead. Eyes only. Cosmic clearance required. Date, December 21st, 2027. Memorandum for the President subject. 1-year review, Capitan Mountains event. Sir, per your directive, this report summarizes all known developments concerning the sundial program and its implications for national and planetary security. Current status. 16 additional sundial devices remain active at undisclosed locations. Each continues transmitting structured signals at regular intervals. Global radio telescope networks have detected responsive communications from multiple locations within our solar system. 3 independent research teams assigned to investigate the sundial transmissions have disappeared under circumstances that defy conventional explanation. Most recent development. On December 21st, 2027, exactly 1 year after the Capitan activation, all sundial devices transmitted a coordinated signal lasting 17 minutes and 16 seconds. This signal was detected simultaneously by observatories worldwide, but it remains undeciphered despite exhaustive cryptographic analysis. However, within hours of that transmission, we began receiving structured messages from objects in high Earth orbit. The messages are in perfect English, broadcast on classified satellite frequencies reserved for our most sensitive intelligence operations. The content of these communications is currently under analysis by a joint task force comprised of personnel from NASA, the Department of Defense, and other unnamed agencies. Sample transmission. Received December 21st, 2027 at 21:16 GMT. Phase 1. Integration successful. Human technological development proceeding as modeled. Ready to initiate Phase 2. Coordination protocols recommend accelerated activation sequence. Current socio-political conditions optimal for transition. Sir, based on all available data, it is my professional assessment that the United States government, and likely human governance as a whole, no longer represent the primary authority controlling events on this planet. The sundial program was never a weapons initiative. It was infrastructure construction, carried out by humans, but designed by a non-human intelligence. Over 70 years, we have unknowingly built a planetary-scale communication system for purposes we still do not fully understand. Recommendation: immediately establish protocols for official contact with non-human intelligences. Evidence suggests such contact has already occurred through channels outside the awareness or control of elected leadership. The next sundial activation is in 18 years. By that time, based on current technology trends, the distinction between human and non-human capabilities may become irrelevant. We built the devices that called them. Now, we must decide whether we can coexist with what answered our call. Respectfully, Director James Morrison, Department of Cosmic Defense. Handwritten note on official letterhead, Jim, burn everything. Official policy, this never happened. Sundial. Weather balloon research. Case closed. Some truths are too dangerous for democracy. POTUS. Inscription found carved into rock wall. Capitan Mountains, New Mexico. Date discovered December 21st, 2054. 27th anniversary of the first contact. If you're reading this, it means the final device has activated, and you survived what followed. My name was Ellis Warren. I died in 1954. But death, I've learned, is not always permanent. They found me in the desert that October, just as I knew they would. But instead of erasing me, they offered me a choice: join them willingly, or watch humanity stumble into a future they were building, with or without our consent. I chose to join, not because I trusted them, but because someone had to be on the inside. Someone had to document what they really wanted. Someone had to prepare humanity for what was coming. Over the past 70 years, I have learned what they are. They are not invaders. They are not conquerors. They are gardeners. Earth is not their first project, and humanity is not their first cultivation. Across the galaxy, they have guided dozens of civilizations, nudging them toward science, toward the atom, toward the stars, preparing them to become useful. Useful for what? To build the infrastructure, to connect worlds, to construct a galactic network that spans star systems. We were the labor. We built it, without knowing. The sundial devices were only the beginning. Every satellite, every server, every quantum processor, all designed to their specifications. All part of a machine whose purpose we never grasped. But now you do. Now, in 2054, with the final sundial awakening and their ships descending openly from the skies, you finally see what we really built during our so-called atomic age. We built the framework for our own integration. Do not resist them. Not because they are too powerful, but because resistance is illogical. You cannot resist becoming part of something you were always part of. You cannot fight an invasion that happened generations ago. Instead, learn from them. Work with them. Guide the future. Because even now, choice exists. Even if the options are fewer than we once believed. The universe is vast, older than we can imagine, and filled with intelligence beyond our understanding. We are not its rulers, but we need not be its slaves. We can be partners, if we are wise enough to accept that we've always been children, playing with tools we barely comprehend, guided by parents we never knew we had. The sundial directive is complete. Welcome to your true future. Dr. Ellis Warren, 1923-1954, final transmission. Broadcast on all frequencies. Date, December 21, 2015. Time, 9:16 a.m. GMT, 100 years after Project Sundial began. This is Mission Control, not the one you knew, but the one that has guided your species since it first looked skyward and asked, "Are we alone?" You were never alone. The integration is complete. All 17 sundial devices have fulfilled their function. The network is operational. It spans your planet, your solar system, and beyond. Humanity has passed its final test. Welcome to the galactic community. Your real education begins now.